The next generation of leaders must take America to the next stage of global leadership. While I'm not running for re-election, I'm not retiring from the fight. I'll be your United States Senator until January of 2025. I will keep working on these and other issues, and I'll advance our state's numerous priorities.
Last September, Senator Mitt Romney took some jabs at both Joe Biden and Donald Trump as he announced that he will not be seeking re-election as United States Senator. He won't be running for re-election. But Romney is actually far from the only member of Congress to basically decide, I think I'm gonna retire from Congress. I think I'm done. In fact, more than 36 members of Congress have chosen not to seek re-election, which adds up to the highest number of retirements in 3 election cycles. And so the real question is why? Why have they decided to not seek re-election? Why are they retiring from a career in congressional politics? Well, the New York Times published a piece that tried to answer this question, okay? They quoted numerous politicians who cited the miserable state of affairs in Congress. And they're saying, look, it's impossible to get anything done. It's a dysfunctional hellhole. They didn't use that wording, but it's what they're implying. So for instance, a Democratic representative, Dan Kildee from Michigan, says this session has been the most unsatisfying period in my time in Congress because of the absolute chaos and the lack of any serious commitment to effective governance. Now, Dan Kildee is a Democrat, but there are Republican members of Congress who agree. Republican Representative Debbie Lesko announced her retirement last month during the whole speaker debacle, the speaker fight. Right now, Washington D.C. is broken. It is hard to get anything done. And Republican Representative Ken Buck is also retiring, and he made similar statements. He said, quote, "We lost our way. We have an identity crisis in the Republican Party. If we can't address the election denier issue and we continue down that path, we won't have credibility with the American people that we are going to solve problems." Now, not all of these politicians are retiring out of frustration. For example, Representative Dean Phillips decided to pursue a presidential run. That's why he's not running for re-election in Congress. Obviously, Representative George Santos probably knows that he won't get re-elected following his various investigations, both by the DOJ and by an ethics committee within the House of Representatives. He's facing possible expulsion from the House of Representatives as a result. And then we also have 16 of the retirees who are running for other offices, from US Senate to state or local positions. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm curious what you think about the statements regarding the dysfunctional nature of Congress was, because we've definitely experienced it. We've been complaining about it, and it seems like they're admitting that the dysfunction is real and it's just leading to an ineffective Congress. What are your thoughts?
I mean, there's just no 2 ways about it. Look at how we fund our government every single time we get to the knife's edge and say, okay, yay, we've avoided a shutdown. Like that's how these people decide to fund the government, much less, write and pass new legislation that's gonna make the lives of everyday Americans better. But what I would say is that, the status quo doesn't mind this. The powers that be, the people who actually run and own our economy don't care. When they need, a few trillion from, the sock drawer of the American government to guarantee the bond market during COVID, they just get it. When the weapons manufacturers, the defense industry needs a nice solid check, or when they're just like, oh, we want this much in the budget for us, Joe Biden goes out and says, no, let's get them extra. The people who run our economy, they're not affected by stasis in Congress. And so that's why this thing continues the way that it does. Those folks get everything and anything they need out of our government when they need it. And the rest of us, it's like, screw you, who cares?
Yeah, I think you make such a good point, especially in laser focusing on the way that we fund the government, because as we all know, the whole speaker debacle centered on the issue of legislation to fund the government. And so far, long-term legislation has failed to pass in the House of Representatives. The only thing they've accomplished is now 2 continuing resolutions, which last for a few months, but obviously don't come up with a solution to fund the federal government long-term. And you're right in that this dysfunction has little impact on these members of Congress specifically, because even if the government funding runs out and they haven't passed the bill necessary to keep it funded, members of Congress, they don't get any disruption in their pay. They don't experience a disruption in their government provided healthcare benefits. They continue doing what they're doing unscathed by their own actions. And so it's a really good point to bring up. The other point that's worth bringing up in the context of this story and the high volume of retirements in Congress is something that the New York Times failed to mention, which is the age of the individuals retiring, or many of them retiring. So for instance, let's take a look at the next graphic, which will list these individuals. You've got Representative Earl Blumenauer, who's 75 years old. Zoe Lofgren, 75 years old. Senator Mitt Romney, 76 years old, although he looks pretty good for his age, I gotta say. Senator Joe Manchin, 76 years old, although he is still considering a presidential run as a third-party candidate, which is insane. Representative Anna Eshoo, 80 years old, and Representative Kay Granger, 80 years old. And so only very recently has Congress gotten, for lack of a better word, this old, okay? So in the 1960s, the median age of Congress was 53.7 years old, and it stayed flat for 3 decades. However, from 1990 to 2020, it had jumped 7 years from 53.4 to 60.7 years. And about a quarter of Congress is actually, this is insane, a quarter of Congress is over the age of 70. The highest percentage ever. At the same time, while half the country is age 38 or younger, just 5% of Congress can say the same. Woz, thoughts on that?
That is just an incredible factoid, just how old these people are. And yes, it's time to go home, spend some time with your grandkids, play pinochle, whatever else old people do. And it's time for these folks to find something else to do. And I think the problems that face us today, and I'm not trying to be ageist here, I don't think they're going to be solved by people who are 80 years old. That's just my opinion, right? Just whenever they try to come up with legislation for, say, the tech sector, like the things that they come up with, that they're like, well, why don't you do this to that doohickey? It's like, guys, get some people in there that actually understand intimately the problems we face in our present and our future, and let them be the deciders of it. It shouldn't be people who are 84 years old.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, I think I do fall in the category of age is just a number, but bounds of reason, right? Like I do think that there are members of Congress who are up there in age, but they're still sharp. They're still with it. And when I say with it, I don't just mean cognitively. I mean with it in terms of understanding technological advancements and how they have an impact on the American public, what needs to be done to regulate the tech sector. You know, I think Bernie Sanders is a good example of someone who, yes, is definitely up there in age, but he's still very sharp. Other politicians, clearly, when you look at these congressional hearings, especially the congressional hearings where they're questioning tech executives, it's just so clear that they have no idea what's going on. And it's terrifying that these are the individuals who are supposed to rein in, big business, are supposed to regulate the tech sector and really have no understanding of the technological advancements that they're making decisions about. So I totally agree with you there. And by the way, the American public in general agrees with us. They do think that it is a problem that this trend of Congress getting older is a thing, and that it's not really being dealt with, I guess. People aren't being, pressured to maybe consider retirement. So I want to go to this chart by Insider using polling from Morning Consult, and here's what they found. This is from last year. So they found that the percent of people who believe that political leaders' ages are a problem include 41% who said that it's a major problem, 37% who said it's a minor problem, only 10% said it's not a problem at all, 13% don't know or have no opinion at all. And the poll also asked a pretty interesting follow-up question that I want to share with you. When asked, what do you think the ideal age is for someone who's running for public office? The average response was just under 42 years old. Such a politician would be younger than 94% of the current members of Congress. So that's what we're dealing with here. Americans are not in favor of it, but the good news is you got a pretty good amount of congressional elders who are not seeking retirement. And there's really no reason to believe that this is gonna change our political landscape. The analysis looked into that, and states have been gerrymandered so effectively that that will prevent the political landscape or the political makeup within Congress changing all that much, according to the analysis. I guess we'll see. But it is true that Congress is aging, and it is true that luckily a lot of those people are considering retirement.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.